I've got a challenge for you. Look at any photograph, camera, or roll of film from the 1970s to the early 2000s, and tell me what company they were made by. I bet that you'll find just one name: Kodak. For more than a century, Kodak was photography. It was a brand that everyone recognized. Not just the technology, but the culture that surrounded it too. So much so, in fact, that any memorable moment came to be known as a Kodak moment. Yet, late one night in January 2012, the world watched as Kodak fell to its doom. After almost 130 years of absolutely dominating the nostalgia market, the company filed for bankruptcy and branched out into obscurity. The Kodak moment was finally over. So, what happened? How could one of the most valuable brands on the planet run out of money? Well, as we'll discover, Kodak fell victim to its own success. Today, I'm going to tell you the story of how Kodak went from hero to zero. But first, a question. How many photos do you take on holiday? A few hundred? A few thousand? We're pretty snap happy these days, but at the start of the 20th century, photography was just a pipe dream for the average Joe. That's where Kodak comes in. It all started with the invention of dry film by George Eastman in 1878, when he formed the company Eastman Kodak, which we know as just Kodak. In 1892, a new era of innovation was born. During the early 20th century, Kodak's portable and affordable cameras, like the Brownie and the Instamatic, brought photography to the people, and this totally revolutionized the industry. The strategy at the heart of Eastman's business was to sell cameras on the cheap, but rake in the money from consumables like film, chemicals, and paper instead. Needless to say, Kodak became hugely successful. And of course, it didn't stop there. Kodak branched into motion picture films in 1932, and by the 70s, it owned 90% of the film market and 85% of the camera market in the US. Kodak cameras were even there when humanity took its first steps on the moon. Of course, this was just another Kodak moment, a phrase coined by the company's ingenious marketing campaigns, which quickly spilled over into all areas of popular culture. Alongside the entire film and camera industry, soon, even life's most precious memories were being attributed to Kodak too. Yet, Kodak moments too must pass. And in 1976, the company started down a road that it would never turn back from. This was the year that Kodak employee Steve Sasson would invent the prototype for the digital camera, and this marked the beginning of the end for the company. Enter digitalization. The invention of digital cameras ushered in a new era for the world of photography and film, and it wasn't long before more companies started dipping their toes in the water. This was a wave that would soon become a tsunami, but one that Kodak mostly ignored. It's true, Kodak wasn't really bothered about this emerging market. Why? Because although the company had literally invented the digital camera, its bread and butter was still physical film. And after all, Kodak was still making loads of money from it. Why sacrifice your cash cow and waste decades of success for something you think is a passing fad? Kodak believed it had a massive head start against competitors anyway, with plenty of time to prepare if digital cameras did actually start to kick off. And so the company kept pretty quiet on the marketing front. It was so calm, in fact, that it even helped Apple create the digital quick-take camera in 1994. We all know though, of course, that digitalization wasn't just a phase. People fell in love with the idea that they could take as many photos as they wanted, look at them, and then delete them on the fly. Suddenly, the idea of blindly taking pictures and then waiting for the film to develop wasn't so appealing. And by the time Kodak finally realized the truth, it was far too late. It was during the 1990s that Kodak reared its head a little. The CEO of the time, George Fisher, invested $2 billion into digital research and development. Kodak even drew up a 10-year digital migration plan and started focusing more on digital products. However, it was all in vain. Every attempt to release a new digital camera, whether it was down to poor pricing, power, or photo quality, was a complete flop. The problem wasn't just the products, it was that Kodak's image and culture didn't suit the digital world. Where other companies were already prepared for the future, Kodak was only just waking up. It's fair to say that there were moments of respite. For instance, Kodak topped the US digital camera sales charts in 2005 and raked in $5 billion. That didn't change the fact that companies like Sony were still undercutting Kodak with better products, prices, and advertisements. The rest of the 2000s painted a pretty bleak picture for Kodak. It slipped to number 4 in camera sales in 2007 and down again to 7th in 2010. By this point, it held a measly 7% of all camera sales. Meanwhile, smartphones and tablets were quickly becoming a hot topic topic, and digital cameras themselves were already being phased out. Although Kodak has developed most of the key technologies that created the digital revolution, it was ignoring all of the warning signs that digitalization was a threat, and so, faced up against a whole host of more aggressive players like Sony, Nikon, and Canon, Kodak quickly fell behind. To pay off its increasing debt, Kodak started selling parts of the business, like its digital printer and copier division, and it split its chemical division into a separate company. By 2010, the company had already shut down its film division and cut around 30,000 jobs. It made bloated investments in printer ink and started eating right through its cash reserves. And when Kodak came to closing factories, laying off thousands more employees, and eventually declaring bankruptcy in 2012, few were very surprised. By the end of the 1990s, Kodak was worth $31 billion. Today, that figure sits at just around $350 million. Don't get me wrong, Kodak does still exist. It's now mostly involved with its commercial print and chemicals business. Kodak even deals with pharmaceuticals, but really, it's just a shadow of its former self. However, every cloud has a silver lining. And maybe the death of Kodak can teach us a thing or two. Most importantly, perhaps, that marketing isn't just about products or advertising, it's about people. What Kodak failed to see during the shift to digital wasn't the change in technology, but the change in attitude. Photography was becoming a social hobby. It was changing the way that people saw the world. Where Kodak was focused on selling products, other companies were selling a lifestyle. Kodak's success had set it up for failure. The company was so blindsided by its past glory that it forgot what its customers really wanted. And that meant that even though Kodak had the ability to adapt to the digital market, it chose not to. In the end, maybe the company just needed to remember what their famous catchphrase really meant. A Kodak moment never referred to reels of film or camera technology. It was always about the people. Hey, thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, please give the video a like and subscribe to more in-depth videos about brands around the world.